And I'm Jacob.
And this is Hall of Fame, which is Hall of Shame. Today, our inductee for the Hall of Fame is Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, a statesman and politician, was born April 13, 1743 in Shadwell, Virginia. Thomas Jefferson, known for his eloquent writing style and reserved manner, became the principal author of the U.S. Declaration of Independence. In June 1776, Jefferson, along with 4 others, appointed to a 5-man committee to draft the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson drafted the original document over a period of 17 days, and he drafted one of the most beautiful and powerful testaments to liberty, equality, and work. Jefferson modeled this after the thoughts of John Locke in his phrase, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. After writing what was known as the wonderful Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson wrote what he believed was one of the most significant achievements of his career. The writing that he believed was so amazing and outstanding was the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom. He wrote this in the late 1770s, and it was eventually passed in 1786. It was not only about freedom of conscience in the state of Virginia, but it was also the principle of separation of church and state. It was a forerunner to the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which had protected people's religious freedoms. In 1789, during Jefferson's early years in U.S. history, he was appointed Secretary of State by President George Washington. He became the nation's first Secretary of State, and he favored states' rights over a strong central government. His ideas clashed with those of Alexander Hamilton, who was the U.S. Secretary of Treasury, and was also in President George Washington's cabinet during his time in office. Jefferson was the 3rd President of the United States and served 8 years in office, from March 4, 1801 to March 4, 1809, when he respectfully left office like the presidents before him. Jefferson believed that the national government should have a limited role in citizens' lives and was elected president in 1800. During his time in office, Jefferson's most significant achievement as President of the United States was the purchase of the Louisiana Territory from France for $15 million in 1803. The Louisiana Territory consisted of more than 820,000 square miles, including lands from the Mississippi River all the way to the Rocky Mountains. These lands also consisted of an area from all the way down south in present-day Louisiana all the way up to present-day Montana. Although he was our president, and we did respect him as a person, he was a slight hypocrite because he owned slaves himself. However, he made the right choice as president to abolish the importation of slaves into the United States. He did so by signing the act prohibiting importation of slaves. Yes, that was the actual name of the act, and it prohibited any new slaves to be imported into the United States from anywhere, whether it be Africa, the Caribbean. He did this in hopes it would end slavery throughout the United States. And now, to some opinions on why Jefferson should be inducted to the Hall of Fame.
So Thomas Jefferson should be in the Hall of Fame because he was an extremely important founding father, kind of set the tone for early America. He worked on the Declaration of Independence, kind of taking a lot of those Enlightenment ideas, setting the ideals and foundation of our country by saying, all men are created equal, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, really kind of important things. He stood up for farmers. He stood up, for that agrarian culture, which was a huge part of the early part of the United States. As president, one of the early presidents, he kind of set, again, the tone of how a president should act, what a president should do. Kept us out of war with France and Britain while they were fighting the Napoleonic Wars. A lot of really good things. Died on the 4th of July, very patriotic, 50th anniversary of the creation of the United States. And he also invented the Lazy Susan. So, thank you, Thomas Jefferson.
Nathan Bedford Forrest was born July 13, 1821 in Tennessee. In 1845, his uncle was killed in a street fight that was started over a business dispute, and Forrest responded by killing 2 of the murderers using a pistol and a knife. This foreshadowed his later life. He was often described as a born military genius. His rule of action, "Get there first with the most men," became one of the most often quoted statements of the war. Forrest is also one of the most controversial figures from the Civil War era. His command was responsible for the massacre of African American Union troops stationed at Fort Pillow, Tennessee in April 1864. At the start of the Civil War, Nathan Bedford Forrest enlisted as a private in the Tennessee Mounted Rifles. He was soon promoted to a lieutenant colonel and placed in charge of raising and training his own battalion. Beginning in December 1862 and well into 1863, Nathan Bedford Force's cavalry harassed General S. Grant's forces as they prepared for an attack on Vicksburg. He cut off communication lines and raided stores of supplies. Force relied on guerrilla tactics and never fully engaged the enemy's superior forces. As a result, General Grant was forced to revise his strategy. Eventually, after a 6-month siege, Vicksburg fell, but Force continued to attack boldly and retreat swiftly, frustrating one Union commander after another and further expanding his reputation. Many Union and some Confederate sources claim that the Confederate forces entering the fort fired on Union troops as they surrendered. Witnesses reported that the rebels shouted, "No quarter," as they shot and bayoneted the Union forces, specifically targeting the black troops as they ran. The Joint Committee on the Conduct of War, composed primarily of radical Republicans, concluded that the Confederates killed most of the Union soldiers after they had surrendered. In the late 1860s, he associated himself with a fledgling secret society called the Ku Klux Klan, and allegedly was the first Grand Wizard. This secret society terrorized blacks and opposed Reconstruction efforts.
Nathan Bedford Forrest is a good choice for the Hall of Shame because he was a slave owner, a slave trader, a general in the Confederate Army during the Civil War, and the very first leader of the Ku Klux Klan.
Forrest's financial situation later became desperate following the failure of his railroad business in 1874. Forced to sell off many of his assets, he spent his later years overseeing a prison labor camp near Memphis. He died in 1877 at the age of 56 and was seen as a symbol of white supremacy.